Okay, recording has started. Okay, so welcome everyone to the March Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. My name's Mark O'Shea, and I'll just sort of do a couple of intro slides. So I'm sitting here in the grey t-shirt. We've got Stephen. He's our other permanent person. And our other two permanent people aren't here, so I guess they're
MIA.
Yeah, missing in action. So they're either our temporary people or they're our contractors who've disappeared.
Well, one of them is an intern.
Yeah. Which one though?
Ben. Ben's the intern.
Okay.
Always has been.
But if you sort of join today to hear Ben or Jerome talk, okay, instead of being disappointed, you should be excited because we've got Aresh here as a special guest today to cover off. We sort of spoke about some of the things that common kinds of questions and scenarios around Windows 365. I think there's probably a few, if you sort of had to think about the frequently asked questions, I'm sure we could probably all come up with a handful of the same questions, such as, why should I use AVD versus W365, or why should I do this in the cloud at all? So we'll sort of give Aresh an opportunity to cover some of those things, as well as give him some. Hopefully, we've got some questions that
If not, I'm sure between you and I, we can feel.
Yeah. So we'll make sure that we've got some good questions, but I'm sure that there'll be some good takeaways for all of us. Now, for today's session, let's just make sure this is working. Yeah. So just a few things that we'll go through. So just for anyone who is new, who hasn't joined us previously, if you just want to do just a quick introduction, you don't have to go into too many details, or if you're more comfortable doing it, just typing into chat versus unmuting, whatever works for you is fine. But just a few details around, who you are, maybe what your role is, as opposed to what your job description is, because we find that what you actually do versus what our job descriptions are can be quite different. We'll sort of just quickly talk about Workplace Ninjas. Is that next week?
Yeah, I think so.
17th March.
Next
Friday.
Okay. Now, we're not going to spend too much time on the Intune suite because that will be our topic for next month. And I think we've got more than enough in that one to cover that we didn't need to sort of double up with this one. And then we'll hand over to Aresh for the Windows 365 piece. So just quickly then, in terms of introductions, let me just resize a few things. I always, it's the same thing every month. I always struggle using, using Teams in a single screen. I've got my preferred dual screen layout.
Do you have the pop out option?
Yeah, but I like having multiple screens with things laid out a particular way. And it makes me uncomfortable when things don't work that way. What are you doing over there? You should be here. So I'm just sort of switching back to so I can actually see what's going on in chat.
I see somebody's frantically typing, which is awesome. But yeah, make sure if you feel comfortable, come off mute and introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. I guess I'll jump in here and go for it. My name's Stuart McCarthy. Up until recently was working for a relatively large Sydney-based MSP. For the last six odd years, I was mainly focusing on data center type workloads, VMware, networking, firewalls, all that type of stuff. I decided to take a bit of a change, and at the moment I'm trying to understand and learn more about Intune, Microsoft Defender, and Microsoft Sentinel, and how the three could be linked together to create more secure workplace environments. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Stuart.
Awesome. Welcome.
Chat. Nothing over in chat. There's some typing though. I can't see who's typing.
No.
I see that there is some typing.
So somebody's typing, but we don't get to.
It's weird because it's us. Like even you'd think I'd see it because we're in my tenant, but no, we're
privacy, my friend. Privacy.
Yeah, don't be shy as well. A lot of people.
That's okay. So we've got Farad. Well, I think you're muted
Hello,
there.
Thomas.
Yes, I am too. So thanks for that. Maybe I'll go next. Yeah, so I've been in IT for a while. The last probably 5 or 6 years, I was working for a MSP called NSYS, which were under Optus, and at NSYS we had, good professional services team where I got a lot of hands-on with start off Office 365 and then moving towards MS 365. So my interest is really in the security, for the endpoint security, mobile phones, devices, laptops, the baseline security. So this all what really interests me. I've been doing a lot of mini projects here for our clients, mainly just onboarding around the Defender. I've pretty much memorized the whole Microsoft licensing by now. I've done it so often. So there are a lot of people that come up to me and ask me about the licensing of this licensing match with that and blah whatsoever. Yeah. So
Did you do that? Sorry, did you do the licensing learning voluntarily, or was it something that was forced upon you?
Forced upon me. Because we had so many customers just confused about it. But once I clear it up, they had an understanding of where they can save the costs and look, that's my interest, and I'm just here to learn more about Intune and all the new advanced features. There's always talks about SCCM, what's happening with that. I still see there's a lot of improvements in Intune which needs to match what all the features that SCCM had. Eventually, you'll get there. And I'm hoping it does sometime. But during the pandemic in particular, this whole MS365 Intune became very, very useful for my team and my customers. So, we're very happy that we were able to take it on. Thank you. Thanks.
So anyone else want to jump in? Okay, not seeing anything. So let's jump to the next slide then. So just a quick reminder for those of you who are Sydney-based or somewhere close to Sydney, that next Friday,
Australia-based.
sorry, Australia-based.
If you want to come in, we're not going to say no.
Years of no travelling. Even we could invite Kiwis in.
True.
But the skies are open again. We should take advantage of it.
It's not my problem. We don't have budget.
Is that we basically that Workplace Ninjas. So having an in-person event that sort of kicks off at 1 and continues through to 7. So if this is something that you're interested in, and I'll drop that link into chat unless somebody else has already. But that way there'll be quite a few of us who sort of come to the meetup will be there. For those of you that things that are during business hours, and then because I think like the last few hours are more social activities.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So if you're someone who kind of has fairly strict requirements about work-related activities happening during work hours, this is something that should tick those boxes pretty well for you. And registration is still open. So if it's something that you're interested in, check out the Meetup page and I'll drop that into chat.
Already have. And the other thing to note is, it's a free event. And it's the first time Workplace Ninjas is going to be running in Australia. It's very much something that you'll see coming more and more often. There's plans to have events in Melbourne and Brisbane as well.
Excellent. Does that mean we have to go and support them in those locations?
I'm up for it.
Sounds like a plan. As long as we don't have to go to Darwin.
No. No Darwin plan.
Okay, so we're not going to spend much time on Intune Suite today, even though obviously because it was launched like last week, it's been getting quite a bit of attention. But we'd already committed to Windows 365, and I'm pretty sure we can fill tonight with Win 365 content without having to bring in multiple additional topics, which is what Intune Suite is. So this makes it really easy for us to decide what next month's session will be. So if the Intune suite is something that you were hoping to hear about, we can probably talk about some of it. We're going to be after the official session for tonight. We've got to be a little bit careful with some of it though, because I'm a little bit blurry as to what we may or may not be able to talk about. So I'll be treading very carefully and pointing towards things that I'll be quoting directly from blog posts and websites.
So will I.
So that's something that we'll cover off next. And even like one of the things that we can probably talk about that was something that we did talk about a little bit when it was first announced in terms of like expectations of what's included with base products versus add-ons, etc. That's something that we can probably after the Windows 365 session, if anyone wants to go down that rabbit hole, I'm more than happy to lead you there. So that's really just it for the intro. So a nice quick intro today. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Aresh. So I think everyone's got presenter capability, so you should be able to jump in.
Thank you.
So not too much of a preamble this month. It was really hard not to include extra bullet points on that Intune suite slide. It's like, I want to include more. Okay, so
I'll be able to see the screen and everything, everyone. Oops.
Yep.
Are we able to see the screen?
Yep.
Am I audible as well? Because I've turned on my mic as well on the device, if that is making any difference. Okay, I'll take it as a yes then. So thanks everyone for joining this session. My name is Aresh Sarkari. I am a senior solutions architect at Dell Technologies. I'm probably the first MVP in Australia for Windows 365. I got my MVP in December, and probably from a product standpoint as well. Windows 365 is a 1 year old or roughly around 1 year-ish old product as well. So we are going to take a deep dive look into what is the hybrid work status right now. After that, we'll dig into what is Windows 365 and also try and see what is Azure Virtual Desktop. And finally, we'll try to make a design decision as to which one to pick and for what reasons. We'll look at the capabilities where how does the Windows 365 get managed? It's through Microsoft Intune. And last but not the least, we would do a demo hands-on. I just wanted to know and gauge from you guys, what's the kind of interaction would you prefer? Do you want me to spend more time on the deck and less time on the demo, or more on the demo and go rush through the deck? If like anyone has any preference or anything like that?
Take a look at chat.
So if there's nothing, then probably I like to show more demo than going through the deck, okay? So let's see what hybrid work is looking like, right? And before I dig into the hybrid work, what I'd like to reflect back is remote work is not new. Remote work has been around for decades. However, the way hybrid and remote work was getting carried out before pandemic was a little different. Like I myself can reflect back in 2018 and 2019 I used to go to office almost 3 to 4 days a week. And then we got all struck by pandemic, and pandemic changed things together. It was like a year and a half that we never went to the office, and still work was getting done at the same time. And now, after post-pandemic as well, things are different. I'm not sure about everyone's situation out here, but like, for example, my personal case, from 3 to 4 days a week, I've started doing 1 day a week in the office. In fact, it has taken a toll on offices. Like most of the offices have decided to consolidate their multi-offices into a single office as well, because hybrid work is real and probably the future of the way things are going to turn out. And that brings us to some statistics which would derive out of the Work Trend Index survey carried out by Microsoft for 30,000 people who participated in the survey. And it leads us to something called as a hybrid paradox as well. So 73% of the workers say they want flexible remote working options, and which says a lot, like out of 30,000 people, 73% said that we would like to continue or we would like remote working options. At the same time, 80% of the managers had to be more flexible for home work from home policies. And the other statistics which causes this whole hybrid paradox kind of a scenario is 67% of the people or employees who responded want more in-person collaboration. Now, if it was me, like, what do I take back from this whole number statistic? It's like, oh, there's some confusion. People want to work from home. At the same time, 67% of the employees want to work in person. Now, remember, these statistics are from 2021, but still very relevant. At a later date, sometime in the future, I'll share the 2022 statistics of the Work Trend Index, which are even more mind-bending and opens up a different dimension to it. But I thought this was little relevant to understand why this hybrid paradox kind of situation where though remote work is there, but at the same time, people want to have meetings and collab in person as well. So that's where the landscape is. And that brings us to what are the organization demands? What does organizations need for all of this to happen and for remote work to happen? All organizations at this point in time, nobody can say that we do not offer remote or hybrid work, because that would be so not lucrative or so not cool, and you probably would not be able to attract talent as well. Elastic workforce, like a lot of seasonal business, a lot of people working in retail have seasonal requirements where during Christmas they see a spike, and once Christmas period's over, the spike goes down. So elastic work is something which is going to hang in there. Organization expansions and mergers and acquisitions is something which most of the organizations in today's age and era have to undergo. At the same time, what we also noticed during the pandemic, if someone out here living in Australia noticed or not, that there was a laptop shortage. Everyone, when the pandemic struck in March, and probably by April, May-ish, there was like tons of laptop shortage. Even for enterprises, like enterprises couldn't get brand new devices, and there was a bit of a wait period. Now, that brings us the opportunity that if you had a PC or a laptop, old device, where you could still be productive, so bring your own PC or bring your own device is definitely a key requirement or a must-have for any organization needs. Security and compliance, as we know, the landscape, especially in our country in the last 1 year, has become so much security focused. We do not have to touch on things that have undergone, like Medibank being the latest of all security compromises that have taken place, and security and compliance is probably the top items in every company's small or big agenda to go ahead and work. And last not the least is scalable workloads like on demand. How many of you in the room have undergone a complete scale up during the pandemic? Like I remember most of our clients, because remote work came in and nobody knew how to make it all happen, we saw a sudden spike where it from doing like 2,000 virtual desktops, all of a sudden now I need another 1,000 or 1,500 more virtual desktops and apps being provisioned into the environment. So definitely a scalable and elastic solution, what organization would demand. A new solution was getting brewed in the back end from Microsoft. Microsoft already even before had a solution, something called as Windows Virtual Desktop back in the day, however, further renamed to Azure Virtual Desktop, which has been in the market for many years, which essentially could do a lot of use case handling around persistent desktops, non-persistent desktops, or even app streaming kind of mechanisms to be delivered through remote work. However, that particular offering, which I would categorize as a desktop as a service offering, still requires a lot of hand-holding in terms of you need Azure skills, you need probably virtual desktop skills. At the same time, you probably need networking skills in-house. So it was not like someone could just go in and turn that particular Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure Virtual Desktop on and you would be up and running. You probably would require a lot of design work, a lot of design decisions to be made around networking, how and what you want out of the offering. Is it like personal desktops? Or do you want pool desktops, multi-session? Do you want to use Windows 10 multi-session? So all I'm trying to say is you had to make a lot of design decisions and you still needed a big IT team. And in the background of July is when this particular product called as Cloud PC or Windows 365, which is an all-in-one solution. And I would probably, though it might be categorized under desktop as a service, I probably would categorize this as a software as a service kind of solution where all the heavy lifting along with the networking, the image, the security and how you access it, the client, all of the heavy lifting is done by Microsoft. All you need to do is put on the apps and deliver that particular virtual desktop to your end users. So all the heavy lifting around having an IT team to manage and maintain was taken away with this particular solution called as Windows 365. What it essentially brought to the table was your content was in the cloud and you could pick and run from wherever you left. It was a persistent desktop. So biggest challenge around biggest challenge around virtual desktops have been the cost and people not willing to use persistent desktops because it is expensive to use. But what the downside of that was non-persistent desktops, and what non-persistent desktops essentially brought to the table is where people, if they logged off, whatever they did in the session goes away or gets deleted. So you cannot continue working from where you left. And essentially, Windows 365 is a full-on persistent one-to-one desktop. You can call it like your own Windows 11 endpoint in the cloud, managed and maintained by Microsoft for you. It has consistent settings across the device. What do you mean by that is if you were leveraging your settings for physical devices, you can 95% of the overlap settings can be brought forward to the cloud PC and can be applied to the cloud PC. Essentially, the compute and the storage aspects are pretty much elastic. You can pick and choose the size of the desktops, which will definitely take a look in the demo. There are different t-shirt sizes available for the Windows 365 Cloud PC, which you can pick and choose. And all the apps of the end user choice or your enterprise requirements can be delivered on a per desktop or a group of cloud PC devices together, which we'll also take a look in the demo. Last is out-of-the-box security, out-of-the-box zero trust principles. As Microsoft is managing and maintaining this particular desktop, out of the box, it is secure. It just can't talk to another virtual desktop, which is a big thing if you've come up from a different VDI solution kind of a place where typically if you have a subnet and within that subnet, if there were 10 desktops, they all could talk to each other. And then you have to use different kind of solutions in place to put a virtual firewall, which it stops doing the broadcast on. However, in this case, because it is managed by Microsoft in a managed network, there's no broadcast with another cloud PC in the same environment. Plus, it can be very well integrated with Microsoft Defender, which also we would see. From Windows 365 perspective, what the users love about it, once you've deployed Windows 365 into your environment, it is a streamlined access across devices. As I said, it's a persistent desktop for your user. And essentially, let's take a hypothetical example that the work device or the personal device is a Windows laptop, and then the user has an iPad device. There are clients, the Windows 365, which just went GA probably 15 days back, is available for most of your device types in the market: Mac, Android, Chrome OS, Windows, or Linux, all the end types. So no matter what endpoint the end user has, he can continue his work from wherever he's left. So the example is you are at work, you opened up your Windows 365 Cloud PC, you have an Excel spreadsheet open up, and that's what you've been working on. You left work from there and you traveled and went back home. At home, instead of opening and firing up your laptop, you decided to open up your iPad that day and want to just take a quick peek into the Excel. So wherever you left the Excel, when you connected on through your iPad, you would be brought back to the same Excel spreadsheet which you were working. So you get the flexibility of working across different type of devices and not having to redo things on a different device type if so, which is a big pain point in other solutions that we have. Also, all the stack is managed and maintained by Microsoft, so it is auto updated. You do not have to take care of patching. You do not, and essentially, it's not auto updated without enrolling. Only if you have enrolled into auto patch, then you get auto patch and the device, the Windows 10 or Windows 11 endpoint stays up to date after that. But even if you've not done that, I will showcase you different ways of how to carry out the updates in a very seamless fashion without having to worry about making sure the compliance reasons are not met of endpoints being not patched. And from a personal end user standpoint, the benefit, what users love is that it's a seamless experience. It's the same experience like if you've delivered through a physical laptop, the user has the same experience of Windows 11 inside the cloud PC as well. From an IT standpoint, what it brings to the table and why the IT teams love Windows 365, it's scalable and resilient. You do not have to manage the infrastructure, the network, the firewall, the Azure subscription, the other components of RD Gateway, RD Web, which are essentially all the components which are magically working behind your cloud PC, which you do not have to manage and maintain, update, patch, which Microsoft does on your behalf. You get the benefit of it being run by Microsoft. What you could do is you can scale up and down depending on your requirements. So essentially the same use case during pandemic where most of the organizations had to go ahead and put more desktops, more apps into their platform so that people could efficiently work on remote help. All you had to do is increase your license count and assign those new desktops without having to worry that you need to procure hardware, you need to build the VDI systems, or nothing on those lines. And it was fully managed and maintained through the Microsoft platform. Predictable costs, that's something which all the CFOs love, that essentially cloud with Azure Virtual Desktop or any other platform for virtual desktop, the biggest problem is unpredictable costs. Your cost is different every month because it is dependent on how the usage patterns of individual users have been. What Windows 365 brings to the table is a flat cost, which I'll show you during the demo, is that depending on the t-shirt size that you pick for your Windows 11 desktop, you have to pay a flat fee for that particular desktop. So it's roughly around 110 or 111 AUD for a decent size Windows 365 desktop, and it's fixed. Now, whether you use the desktop one day, whether you use your desktops all 30 days, whether you power it on like keep it on for the entire month, none of those configuration items where you have challenges in a cloud or even running in Azure Virtual Desktop where everything is so dependent on the time or number of connections made and the networking cost. All of that goes away and you have a fixed cost, which you know is predictable month over month for the usage. And last, it's simple to buy. You don't have to go through some special person, wait in a queue for getting the license. All you do is go into the admin.microsoft and get your number of licenses from there and start paying. And if you have enterprise agreement, it automatically rolls up in your billing.
Allowed to play devil's advocate?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Sorry, late.
Once the demo start.
When's the demo? I can
Yeah, once the
ask
demo
questions
start,
like
yeah.
Yes.
AVD versus W365 breakpoint.
Absolutely, and we're going to cover that shortly. Now, what the additional benefit of Windows 365 is not only the desktop, because if you think from an isolated team perspective, like imagine you were just the virtual desktop team in your organization, right? You are only thinking from a perspective that I care about the desktop and nothing else. However, the biggest benefit once you start looking at layers above, probably at the enterprise architect level, is that it gets very well integrated with Microsoft Defender. And as I said, security is paramount and the number one topic which any organization is talking about. And the biggest hitter out here, which I would say is Defender. I hope if I can make it in the demo today and show you, I have it integrated and it's brilliant.
So just a quick thing. So just to make sure that everyone understands that here where you're talking about Defender, you're specifically talking endpoint.
Defender for endpoint, yeah. Defender for endpoint is a particular type which we're talking about. Defender is way, way broader in terms of a topic, but yeah, out here we're just talking about endpoint. Another thing where definitely if you want to enable multi-factor conditional access policies, how about if your company was just local to Australia and you wanted to set up a conditional access policy which was regional, saying only and only allow access to people in the Australia region to the Windows. And you can do all of that through using Azure Active Directory and conditional access policies. And last but not the least, the entire Windows 365 fleet can be managed and maintained through a single console, which you already leverage today or hoping that you already leverage today for your physical endpoints. It's just acts like an extension. So Windows 365 is not that different. Yes, certain things are different, which hopefully I can cover in the demo. But other than that, or I would say 99% of the things can, whatever you're managing for your physical fleet can be brought forward for your Windows 365 fleet. I think the slide has just got up and down, I'm guessing. There was one slide. Just a second, guys. I rather show you the right flow. My bad. First, I started locally developing the slides, then I decided to move it on OneDrive. That's why the earlier slide was missing something. I had that intuition. Why is it missing few things? Okay, so now that brings us to a very interesting topic. Now we know what is Windows 365. It's a persistent cloud PC desktop. It can be managed, maintained through the same unified endpoint management solution, which we use and leverage on the physical fleet. It integrates very well with the Microsoft ecosystem around Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and all your Microsoft 365 applications. However, there is a competing or there is other offerings which are also offered by Microsoft called as Azure Virtual Desktop. And there is some more offerings from other partner vendors from Citrix and VMware as well. Now, which one to pick versus one over the other is what we are going to try and take a look. As I mentioned, there are multiple use cases when you're talking about a virtual desktop delivery. The first use case is a persistent desktop. What is a persistent desktop? Persistent desktop is nothing but over and over again, whatever you did or whatever you configured, whatever settings, policies, applications that you have on your desktop, you get that same experience over and over again. Doesn't matter whether you log off, you shut it down, every single time you continue getting the same experience. There is another type of a desktop called as non-persistent desktop. And what that is, it's essentially a desktop which is used for specialized environments and specialized requirements where imagine you were working at a call center and all you did is open up a browser and were doing some customer CRM related stuff. And at the end of the shift, someone else needs to come in and starts working. So you had an 8-hour day and you were pretty light. You actually don't need a desktop where every single time when you start your day, you needed the same configuration, same settings, which were there yesterday. So that kind of desktop is called as non-persistent. Typically, non-persistent has a bit of a detail in it that is, if certain products or certain vendors make the non-persistent desktop very unique. Like, for example, VMware's non-persistent desktop deletes at log off. So essentially, it's a single or a brand new copy every single time. It does it through not magic, it's called as instant cloning technology. And Citrix does it a little differently through machine creation services. But everyone has their own technology, and the non-persistent desktop in general would be net new every single time. And the last of the least is your published applications or streaming application. What essentially that is, if imagine a use case where you do not want to give the user entire desktop look and feel, and all you wanted to deliver is, let's say, hypothetically, Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. All that was required for the end user is Microsoft Excel. He does not need a full-on Windows endpoint, which has Edge, which has Explorer, which has other applications running on that particular device or a multi-session host. And he just needed Word and Excel. That particular use case is called as published apps or app streaming, where all you deliver to the user is an app, not an entire desktop experience. And essentially, that particular SKU is mainly used for cost-saving purposes, like where you do not want to deliver an entire desktop and pay or overpay the license. All you want to do is just deliver that app to that particular user. Now, all these three use cases which we discussed, okay, cannot be met with Windows 365 alone. Windows 365 is only a persistent desktop use case where over and over again, you get the same desktop. It's like a dedicated virtual machine, I would say, to make it oversimplified, a dedicated virtual machine running in the cloud in Azure for you all the time. However, what you can do is meet other business requirements such as non-persistent desktop and app streaming. These two use cases, along with some graphics use cases where imagine, I'm sure this is coming in Windows 365 as well. Imagine you wanted to run CAD on your virtual desktop. What most of the solutions like Azure Virtual Desktop and other partner solutions can run CAD on your as a software on your laptop. All you need is a graphic card or a shared graphics card on the machine, and then you would be able to run the GPU related workloads on it. That particular offering right now is also not there in Windows 365. So essentially, if you had requirements where you had to do non-persistent desktops for cost saving purposes, a lot of companies would do non-persistent desktops because they think giving that same user experience is not that important. For security reasons, for costing reasons, that particular use case is best suited for non-persistent. Plus, why costing? You may ask. If you reflect back on what I said for the Windows 3, it's a dedicated one-to-one VM in Azure Cloud for you. A non-persistent desktop, on the other case, is more like terminal services, also RDS, remote desktop services, now further refined to multi-session. And what it is it's a big size VM, or it's a larger size virtual machine, which can host multiple user sessions. So imagine your remote desktop where single server is being utilized by 25 odd people are logging in from the same server. So imagine if I could give or provide desktop experience, also now called as Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session based VMs, where I could give you the entire desktop experience. However, 15 people were logging onto that same VM for using. And obviously, you can't give them admin access. Obviously, they can't install their desired application. Obviously, they can't do personal, because whatever they're doing is going to have an impact on that particular virtual machine for everyone else. So there is some other technologies which can do profiling data and office data very well, called as FS Logics. But that technology is part of Azure Virtual Desktop. So in a nutshell, let's wrap this up. If you were to do persistent desktops alone, Windows 365 is the way to go because it brings predictable cost. If you had to do non-persistent desktops and app streaming, then Azure Virtual Desktop is the way to go. You may argue, well, you can also do personal desktops, which is the equivalent of persistent desktops in the Windows 365, which I'm referring. It can also be done in Azure Virtual. So Azure Virtual Desktop can do all three types that I was talking about. However, the biggest challenge is the balance, what you have to do. Most of the customers that I'm seeing right now in the field is a mix of both technologies. Windows 365 is bringing predictable month-over-month costs with no uncertainty from personal desktops in Azure. So what I'm trying to say here is persistent desktops can be, let's say, delivered through both the solutions. However, month over month, your bill is going to differ if you did personal or persistent desktops in Azure Virtual Desktop versus Windows 365. Because 365 is a fixed cost, hypothetically $111 per month. In Azure Virtual Desktop, it's dependent on what was the network throughput of that particular desktop per month, how many hours that the desktop was powered on. Did you put on power provisioning policy when the end user was not using? Was it shut down? It just depends on so many factors that your costs cannot be predicted to the degree that it becomes like a fixed cost. Every month, it's just going to vary. And hence, you can't have to use a mix of solutions. So in a nutshell, to wrap it up, most of the big customers or most of your enterprise customers, right, are going to have a mix of Windows 365 and AVD. There's no one solution which can do everything. And that's why Azure Virtual Desktop has its own place, and so is Windows 365. I'm not going to touch on vendor-based solutions at this point in time, but if there's more interest, at the end of the session, we'll take it up as questions in a question format.
So I've got a question.
Sure.
Right?
Let's wrap it up because I think I know you have, I know you're excited about the question. Let's take it up towards the end, else I won't be able to finish the content and the demo.
Okay.
Is that all right?
I've got to go, but yeah, my question was simple.
Okay, let's go for it then.
What does Microsoft make more money out of? AVD or Windows 365? And I'm a Microsoft guy. I don't know the answer to that. But my assumption is that today in deployments, Microsoft would make more money out of Windows 365 than AVD, which is putting the onus back on the partner or the customer to do the work to fill the void between the two. You don't know the answer to that.
So,
But my expectation would be there's more margin for Microsoft in a Windows 365 deployment, because you did say at one point, and it's not recorded, that AVD does it all.
yep,
AVD does it all. Because you can create a single session, AVD, to do the equivalent kind of what Windows 365 does. But, you know, I'm just, because I'm the kind of guy who pokes the bear, I poke the bear.
Yeah.
So Phil, I think what you'd probably need to factor in there as well is the COGS associated with Windows 365 are a lot higher than AVD. So profit margin will be different.
So you're saying because they allocate a NVIDIA chip, GPU type model?
It's also the engineering resources associated with 365 adds on additional components.
Which is the automated updates and things like that.
Running the service itself and keeping the platform running will add additional overheads and costs compared to having your IT admins doing all of everything from the tin up or from the VM up.
So to me, again, it's people balance.
Yeah.
If the people on the call want to do the work, they could do it with AVD and create a similar result.
Yes.
But Microsoft does the work because
Yes.
it's moving from IaaS to a SaaS model, and in a SaaS model, responsibility model now shifts to the vendor. Okay.
I think at the same time, if you ask me, more money is to be made in Azure or Azure Virtual Desktop,
Out of AVD?
AVD.
Oh, for a partner, there would be absolutely more.
Not even just partner, even from a Microsoft perspective, because everything is such a utilization based. So as I said, if you did not apply power policies, the VM stays on, more billing, more money gets generated. Out here, if you're not doing anything, you don't configure anything, you don't have an IT team, you just have a fixed cost. It doesn't matter now.
And mate, I work with the small business channel and they are so lazy. Windows 365, we were running a session today with tens of people in a room and they go, I don't want to know about AVD or too hard. I just want to sell Win 365.
That's exactly where
It's just too easy. I just click a button and my customers have got it and I can give them a predictable price. And I'm lazy. I just want to go and cruise in my sailing boat out there and take the money.
absolutely spot on. That brings us back to our slide. If you look at the middle section, if you went ahead and made a decision around Azure Virtual Desktop, you better have Azure guys on your team. You better have an IT team on for your company. Else, you won't be able to do, or you won't succeed, or a partner or an MSP. Else, you will not have success in Azure Virtual Desktop. A lot of people in the pandemic have failed, tried, and some of them have succeeded. The ones who've succeeded essentially had Azure and Azure guys in their IT teams to succeed. Else, there's no way you can just switch on Azure Virtual Desktop. Yeah, from a demo standpoint, someone would come in and show you a sales page and probably turn it on during that sales pitch for you. However, that's not the best way to turn it on. You need to think about how the network flow is going to happen, what design decisions around storage, networking are you going to make firsthand for a better success in Azure Virtual Desktop?
It's fascinating the first few months of the pandemic as people were trying to activate RDS on existing servers. And they said the server died, it can't support RDS.
Exactly.
Right. And then they went, oh, okay, so we're going to establish VPN and let them access applications on their computers. And they went, the computers at home ain't got the capacity.
That's right.
And it was about 3 or 4 months later, AVD just blossomed, skyrocketed, and we ran out of resources in our data centers. But it took a while to go through the pain of, let's make it RDS on an existing server.
Right.
Let's try VPN and enable apps on existing old home computers.
That's right.
Or let's try and order computers for people at home.
And there were shortages.
And there was supply chain issues.
Exactly.
And AVD suddenly fixed it. But yeah, anyway.
And Windows 365 made it much more better. So let's take a look at the flow
Thank you.
out here as to which one to pick, right? Because there's options on the table as we were discussing, right? You have options, and basically with options comes confusion. But this particular slide is trying to decouple the confusion out of it. I would refer Windows 365 as a SaaS offering rather than a desktop as a service offering, because most of the things are even further simplified. I'm not sure if anyone on this call has experience with other vendor-based offering on the same segment of DaaS. And if you had, and then if you started learning or picking up Windows here, you would realize, oh my God, this is leaps and bounds better, because most of the heavy lifting is done by Microsoft and you don't have to get into the nitty-gritties. So no VDI skill is required. And the same platform which you've been leveraging, Microsoft Intune, can be plugged in and start to manage the Windows 365. Of course, there's 2 SKUs around business and enterprise, and you can very well lock it into your hybrid environment. That is, you can get your Windows 365 enterprise talking with your on-premise network, which we'll also see. And what are your design decisions or requirements to select Azure Virtual Desktop? Now, you have further requirements of delivering non-persistent desktops. You have requirements of doing app streaming. You have vendor requirements, or you want to leverage your existing investments on partner-like solutions like Citrix and VMware, or you want to do hybrid scenarios where 70% of your workloads are running on premise and 30% of the workloads you want to use it on the cloud as a burst. So for all those particular reasons, you have to go down the path of you doing Azure Virtual Desktop, because the other solution, Windows 365, just cannot do those particular requirements at this point in time. However, now that you've got full control over your VDI platform with Azure Virtual Desktop, it essentially means now you need a dedicated or a VDI team which can just do your images, Windows part of it. And then you need the Azure infrastructure guys who can take care of the Azure networking and all the Azure bits and bobs, which would be involved for such a solution. And last but not the least, it's pretty evident, like what we were discussing, persistent desktops, unfortunately today, can be delivered by both solutions. It's called as personal desktop in Azure Virtual Desktop, and the Windows 365 is but natural persistent desktop. So both can be delivered, but now the choice that you pretty much have to make is whether you want a fixed predictable cost model, or you still want to go down the path of unpredictable variable model month over month. Quickly running through the architecture of Windows 365, the good thing, or what you really don't have to worry about, is you don't have to do anything, because Microsoft is doing everything for you. So which is your Azure subscription managed, maintained by Microsoft, the virtual network, the resource, which is your virtual machine, the network, which is running the Windows 365, all of that is managed and maintained with all the boxes that you see layer after layer is done through Microsoft. All you do is you have a client, log into your Windows 365, and this particular type of desktop is called as Microsoft hosted network or Microsoft managed network. desktop, and you can still leverage your existing Azure AD and Microsoft Intune to manage and maintain this particular desktop. The other type of desktop out here is the hybrid desktop. Now, what this brings to the table is that now imagine you do not want to use the Microsoft managed network. However, you want to talk back to your file servers or file shares on your premise. So essentially, that's where the Azure skills come into the picture. Is you need to establish either a VPN or an express route from your Azure subscription to your on-premise world. Once you've done that, you need to go ahead and establish a connectivity for the hybrid network between the Azure Virtual Desktop, the Windows 365 and Azure. I'm going to showcase that in the demo. And then that particular VNet of the Windows 365 sits on our network, the network that you've created in Azure, and which can talk back to your on-premises for file share communication or any on-premise based communication access. Rest, the subscription where the VM runs, the virtual network for making all of this happen sits within the Microsoft managed network. Before we jump in, all of this can be managed through Intune, and most of it we are going to cover how do we deploy applications, how do we manage the configuration profiles, how do we do security baselines, all of that from Microsoft Intune for not only Windows 365, you can also do that for your Azure Virtual Desktop. And same, whatever you're extending for your physical endpoints can also be leveraged. However, only caveat being Azure Virtual Desktop could be a little different. There are more limitations of Intune managing Azure Virtual Desktop than the Windows 365. As I said, 99% of what you do for your physical endpoint can be replicated for your Windows 365 endpoint. However, not in the case for Azure Virtual Desktop. That brings us to Happy Times demo, and then we'll wrap it up with questions. While I'm firing up the demo, is there any questions at the moment? Any quick questions that I can take right now? Okay. Okay, now I'm running this from a VM, nothing too specific, just letting you know that whatever you're seeing is inside a VM is what I'm running it on. So what I've done is I've opened up the Intune console where all the Windows 365 configuration items are there. And once we look at the backend first, and then we'll see how the user experience is. So we're going to take a look at both the options. People who are familiar with Intune, there's a complete section within Intune for Windows 365. And we'll take a look at each of the options of Windows 365 and see what they are. And then finally tie it up with certain Intune-based things like pushing up apps, doing configuration profiles, things of those nature, and then wrap it up with the end user experience. So essentially in the devices blade, there's a dedicated section for Windows 365. And before you could see any action out here in this particular blade is a prerequisite of the license. If you have license is only when all the action begins. So what I wanted to do is quickly take you to what is the license that you need. Depending on the t-shirt size or depending on what you've purchased, whether you purchase a 2 CPU desktop or you've purchased 4 CPU or 8 CPU as well now, depending on that, you will get a license out here. In my case, as you can see at the bottom, it's a Windows 365 enterprise license. The business license is different. business license is typically targeted towards small businesses, not even medium, I would say, very small business like 20, 25 people company, and typically they would be using business. But most of your organizations, if they already have Intune being leveraged for physical endpoint, those kind of companies would fall under the category of enterprise, where you probably get the enterprise license. Now, as I said, you will have to envision how many licenses do I need, and that's depending on that, you will be buying the license. In my case, I have 5 licenses and I have provisioned 3 desktops. There are my t-shirt size for this particular demo, or what I have in my environment, is a 2 CPU, 8 gigs of RAM. However, there are different types of desktops available which we can use, and essentially they came up with the 8 CPU one as well, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look at the plans and pricing quickly before we go down the technical part. So what's required? Even though you have Intune, there's a dedicated section within the devices blade for Windows 365. It won't get active unless and until you have a license. It might, like they're quite a, like on the tech community forum pages, there are plenty of questions where people have posted saying, I can't see this. Like whatever Microsoft have mentioned in the document, I can provision the cloud PC. Nothing would work because you don't have a license. So what are the t-shirt sizes available? Here are all your t-shirt sizes that are available. It's essentially 3 categories: business, basic, standard, premium. As I was saying, roughly predictable cost: 4 CPU, 16 gig RAM, 128 GB machine is going to cost you $113 flat on. Whether now you use the desktop all 30 days like a superhuman, or you use it 1 hour in a day, or nothing. Predictable cost from the perspective, and 3 SKUs essentially. 2 CPU, 8 gig is what I'm using. So roughly, if I was paying for that SKU, it's around $70. The basic SKU is 2 and 4. And I think I've seen the 8 gig SKU as well. But I don't know why it's not showing up here, but I'm sure they've just recently announced the 8 CPU SKU as well. At this point in time, once again, making sure there is no graphics SKUs available. So there's no VMs which have GPU inside them at this point. If you had GPU requirements, then the only way out is through doing Azure Virtual Desktop. Let's go in. So the first is nothing but within the blade, you have different sub-blades. One is overview, one are all cloud PCs. The very first thing that you're going to come out here and do once you have put the license and assign the license to users, or in the real world, you would create an Azure Active Directory group and assign that particular group the license. That way, any user within that group is going to get the Windows 365 desktop. The very first thing you're going to do is create a provisioning policy. I'm not going to create one right now. I'm just going to showcase you what my existing provisioning policy is. So the very first thing you're going to do is put a name and make a very big design decision, whether it's going to be Azure AD or is it going to be hybrid join. When I'm referring here as a hybrid join, I'm saying whether it's connected to your Active Directory on-premise version.
I'm curious, how many people on the call would do a hybrid over ANDJ? Are you all just hiding? Well,
Anyone?
Stuart's typing something out.
My recommendation is try and aim for AAD join, guys. don't go down the rabbit hole. Most of your things. Oh, lovely. We had a chat from someone, AAD.
And the other thing, like just to sort of keep it simple, is hybrid AD join is an admission of defeat.
That's a road to nowhere.
That's right. Just don't go down that path. Make sure if you have resistance while making this decision, you defend it properly, get good guidance and defend it. There's really no good reason right now for Windows 365 to be joined to hybrid kind of a setup. Just use Azure AD. In my case, you don't have to do this, but I did this much later as well. I did not have the Windows 365 on my own Azure network because I'm trying to reproduce a scenario where you want the connectivity back onto your on-premise network to access whatever files share from your Windows 365 PC to the on-premise world. For that particular reason, you need an Azure Network Connect or Azure Network Connectivity, which needs to be set up, and you need to specify that rather than using the two types of architectures which I showed you. One was the Microsoft Managed Network and the other was the hybrid. This is an example of the hybrid. The next decision is what operating system. I'll give you an example. I started when I created this provisioning policy, I had started with Windows 10. Then I went in back and modified this particular operating system to Windows 11. So what it essentially means is when you change the operating system out here, it doesn't mean that the old PCs become Windows 11. No, you have to reprovision all of those particular PCs which are either on Windows 10 or don't reprovision, and you can update them through the feature update in Intune, or all the new desktop after you've selected Windows 11 22H2 will be all Windows 11 plus OS optimization. What is that? Anyone? It's nothing but Microsoft, as it's been used for a virtual desktop, they've further gone ahead and optimized the operating system for virtual desktop, because so a great example would be removing Xbox service, which is not required within the virtual desktop. So those are the kind of service optimizations and further operating system optimization, which would make it run more efficient within Azure. That's why it's called as OS optimization. And this is done for you. I'll come on to the questions in the chat very shortly. I can see they're popping up. Let's finish up the demo and then I'll take all the questions towards the end. So that optimization is done for you. Last, before you make the selection, what language and region. At this point in time, it's only English, United States, English. For all English speaking countries, it's these two, but there are other languages as well, which you can use. And what is the assignment? Now, the best way to do this is obviously don't assign it to individuals, please. Always try and assign it to users. So create an Azure Active Directory group, put the users or assign members in them, and then use that particular Azure AD group out here for your provisioning policy. Once this is done, you hit OK, and you would, depending on the amount of licenses you have, your Windows Cloud PCs will start getting provisioned. And in my case, I just have 3 users in that particular group. Hence, I only have 3 cloud PCs at this point in time. And if you would notice, right, and this is just the thing what I was saying earlier, if you notice the first PC, which is my PC, and the other 2 are demo users, you would notice on the Azure network part, there's no network connectivity to those 2 desktops, right? And that's what I was saying, that earlier on, I was using Microsoft Managed Network. So the whole onus was completely on Microsoft Managed Network. I had to not do any Azure integration and create a VNet or nothing on those lines. And those particular 2 desktops are sitting there. And you can see the image it says is Windows 10 is what was provisioned. However, that's not the current operating system inside. using feature updates and rings, I've managed to update these two desktops onto Windows 11 already. So though the image which was used back in the day was Windows 10, but the current desktop, if you log in, is not Windows 10, it's Windows 11. So you'll start seeing all the desktops out here, depending whether they are in a provisioning state or provision state or in an error state. All the statuses would be shown in the report out here. Moving on to custom images. What is custom image? If you don't want to use, I have been using the Windows 11 Microsoft provided Windows 365 image. But if you want to go down the path of a custom image, which is what you will have to create in Azure and put in your applications and everything of your choice on it, and then import that particular application from your Azure subscription over here in Windows 365 Blade in Intune, it would start showing up and then you can manage that. In my case, I'm not doing custom images because guess what? The reason for doing custom images is mainly applications, right? You could push whatever applications using Intune. So you literally don't have to do customize. I still did hear an argument from a customer that I have my antivirus solution that I need to put in because that's what's not in. That's why I need to do custom. We told him you can get a gallery image that is Microsoft built, and the very first application, depending on priority, which we get to deploy, is going to be your antivirus software. Still don't use custom image. There's literally no. Other than that, if you encounter like government needs or something like that, and you still have to go down the rabbit hole of a custom image, feel free to do so. Next is Azure Network Connection. Why this? You don't have to do Azure Network Connection as well. I was trying to simulate the on-premise connectivity from your Windows 365 desktop. We're trying to simulate how you would access your on-premise, and hence you need to do a VNet in Azure, which we're not going to take a look how it's all done, but you need to have a subnet, a VNet and a subnet created for all the Windows 365 desktops that are going to get created. And you can see out here, I have a VNet out here, and this is exactly the subnet which I've dedicatedly created for Windows 6. Now, all of these are getting provision. So if I went into Azure, I would see a NIC out there, which has my Windows 365 desktop. And that's what we're simulating out here. Moving on to the next slide is the user settings, which essentially calls out another big decision that you have to make around admin access, whether you want to offer admin access to your users. And according to me, you should not start with admin access. You should leverage Privilege Identity Manager inside Intune to offer admin access on a very need-by-need basis, rather than offering admin access out of the box to everyone. You could very well develop another provisioning policy and another user setting, which you apply to the provisioning policy, that only this group of users that you've identified as developers who need the admin access, you could create something like that. But out of the box, please go in default with no admin access. Another decision, do you want to allow users to restore your cloud PC? Now, guess what? Not only Microsoft is managing the network, the VM, the subscription, everything, it's also offering you backup restoration. Now, you have your ability to restore up to 14 restore points of your Windows 365. So imagine you want to go back to Monday's version of your Windows 365, something that you did on the desktop broke your desktop. You have the ability, and guess what? It's self-provision. The user can initiate it or the admin teams can initiate it. And you have a decision point out here, whether you want to allow users to do a restore activity by themselves. And if you selected yes, a user could restore his desktop or to the restore point on Monday in this example. And essentially you're assigning whichever user setting policy that you're creating to the users out here. So that's essentially all the blades that you need to get up and running to get the Windows 365 created and assigned. Now comes the next point is what apps you want to deliver onto the Windows 365. So essentially, if you went into the apps, in my case, what I'm trying to reproduce out here is I'm trying to give out few applications onto the platform. So what I'm delivering is a Chrome browser. I'm delivering that browser as an Win32 app onto the Windows 365. I also have few other things like back in the day, Windows 365 app, which was preview. Now is GA, as I told you last week only, it's got GA. These are the applications that I was trying to deploy. Last one is pretty interesting, the Xbox, and that's something which I want to talk. So if anyone who attended the last month's M365 event, our very own Steve had demonstrated that you could also very well use Windows apps and store apps to remove built-in applications within Windows 11, right? If you remember, for those who were not there and for people who are right now there and we're talking about this, he spoke and showcased us that particular thing last meeting. And in 2 hours, I actually tried it out and I wrote a blog post on the same thing as well. It was pretty cool. So what I did is Xbox, just for example, is a service or an application which is still there in Windows 11, which I have no reasons to be using it on my cloud PC. So using what he had said, you could remove applications from your Windows 365 built-in. So this is just an example giving you ideas that you could push store apps, which should be your first preference. If the app was not in the store, then you can also use Win32 applications, that is packaged star.intune win.packages, which you can deploy to your fleet. Custom, they can be also be categorized into custom applications. You can deliver that. These two are the main methods which I would recommend. There are other methods, but I don't even want to go down that path because they are slightly legacy-based methods of deploying applications. Though they are there, either they are coming at a verge of getting phased out by line of business applications and so on and so forth very shortly. Hence, I don't want to go down that path. Two big drivers. One is the store app. That should be your first preference. Search for apps within the store and try to deploy the apps from that store. If that does not work out, if your application does not exist there, then you can go down the path of Win32 apps. So this is just a demo of showcasing just a quick one, clicking on one of the applications. It's a intune.win package, and I'm deploying this Chrome package to my Windows 365 fleet. You can see it's installed on all 3 devices, and it's essentially assigned to an Azure Active Directory group and not individual assignments. So that's how just showcasing the example of pushing apps onto the, and you can see it's a complete intune.win and it has launch and blah, blah, blah methods. This is like imagine like your app packaging guys developing a custom Win32 package and you're using that for deployment. So that's all about apps. Next is what are we doing with terms of configuration policies and security baselines? And then we'll wrap it up and open it up for questions. You can leverage, as I told you, if you remember, I started this queue with Windows 10. Guess what I used to update the Windows 10 to Windows 11? The feature updates. All I did is created a feature update policy ring 0 in my case, depending on your use cases, you can segregate in different rings, 0, 1, 2, 3, depending on your organization needs. And all I did was created a policy here. And this particular policy pushed Windows 11 onto the Windows 10 cloud PCs that I had already had in my environment. So that's one way of doing the upgrades. So you don't have to re-provision in all the scenarios. You might only get into an issue where you actually have to re-provision is the single sign-on. The single sign-on feature, which came in only with Windows 11 22H2 release of the Windows 365 image. If you wanted to leverage SSO, then you might end up with re-provisioning and doing it brand new from scratch, that particular Windows 11 image, which I have been using from Microsoft Gallery. So that's mainly around the updates. And coming to the configuration profiles, what am I doing? So I decided to disable the search highlights feature in my Windows 11. So all I've done is I have numerous amount of configuration profiles out here, which I've been deploying depending or targeted towards Windows 365 or even Azure Virtual Desktop in certain cases. And there's a lot of details on my blog of each elements that are being done as well. So these are just some examples. If you wanted to disable storage redirection, that you don't want your USB drives for your data leakage out. So you could probably create a cloud PC device redirection policy where you say USB is disabled. So you don't have to worry that someone is going to plug in and as the USB redirection, which is not enabled by default anyways, people are going to leak out the data from the cloud PC. So you can set up a lot of, like, you can restrict the clipboard policies, you can do USB redirection, all those kind of policies through the configuration profiles. A few things that I've done is, like, I've disabled the chat icon, I've disabled news and interests. I do auto disk cleanup using storage sense within the Windows 11. Just for demoing purposes, I have a drive mapping, which also I leverage. Smart screen, that is for the Defender pieces, much later topic for a future day discussion, if there is a lot of interest as to what are the benefits when you integrate it well with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So these are just showing you the options and just trying to showcase that it has endless possibilities. You can deploy certificates if you had the requirements of deploying certain root and intermediate certificates on all your Windows 365. You can very well deploy all those particular certificate types as well from here. Then you can do remediation. So for example, if you had some, let's say if you hit certain event ID, you wanted to trigger a remediation, you can do whatever. So in short, whatever you could do on your physical endpoints through Intune, you can do all of that over here as well. So this is all from a perspective of the backend, that is all the backend components. Now let's take a look at how does the front end look like. I'm going to showcase, it can be done through browser as well as the client. So let's quickly see the browser base first. All you need to do is go to windows365.microsoft.com. You'll have to log in with your account. It will showcase, once it authenticates, it will showcase your cloud PC. Obviously, the account that it has picked up doesn't have a cloud PC. So this is the user experience. Whatever you saw until now was the backend IT experience. Ooh. Now the battery is also telling me, please get over the session. You need power. Thank you. Oh, wow. It's the same laptop. Thank you very much. Just give me a second, guys. Okay, so I've logged in through a user, which is me. And if you opened up the browser with windows365.microsoft.com, you will be listed with your cloud PC. All now you could do is click on open in browser and you can access the cloud PC in the browser. Not only in the browser, you can also now leverage the Windows 365 app, which was in preview until last week and now it's gone GA. And that particular app brings you even more possibilities of multi-monitor RDP short part, which we've not even covered. It's very hard to cover such a vast topic. Let's leave it to the overview today. And in the future, if there's more interest, we could cover other topics. So this is how the look and feel of your Windows 365 on the top. You can see it will tell you the name. There's some statistics which it's tell you the connection quality is good. And this is something very important. If you're troubleshooting low latency issues, if your cloud PC is in a different region than the users, that's when these kind of things where you probably are more interested in what's getting used. Now, here you could see the transport protocol is TCP, which essentially tells you that the session which it has made the connection with is not using RDP short path. If when it's using RDP short path, the connection type would be UDP out here. However, I'm in Sydney and this desktop is also very much in Sydney, Australia East. Hence, it's made a good quality connection because there's no latency or anything on those lines. So, so this is like your user experience and this is used for troubleshooting. So that sums it up from an end user experience, and the similar experience is on the client. It's nothing like just install the client on the endpoint of your choice and launch it, log in, and you'll have the exact same experience like what's in the browser out here. The same window over here, the way it's showing up is going to show up in the client. So that's about it from the presentation standpoint. Now we are open for questions. Seems like there's questions in the chat.
I think we've been pretty good at answering them, most of them as they come through.
I see. That's good. Okay, let's go. Let's go through any questions, guys. Open to any questions.
Yeah, look, we have some customers who are, inquiring about this, and I'm quite new to this space of the Microsoft suite of virtual desktops. We have customers who currently have a Citrix environment, and they want to see what's the equivalence, what's the benefits of what this can provide than what we currently have with Citrix. In particular with provisioning services within Citrix. Just want to know, is there any equivalence of not only, I know you can image a desktop, but can you replicate over a pool of 200 virtual desktops quite easily and be able to manage the re-imaging of that pool? For example, if you want to just make a change of a particular incremental update of that image, is it easy to replicate that, put into like maintenance and then replicate it across? Yeah, just wondering, is there such thing as Microsoft has that type of solution yet, or is it in planning?
Yeah, so from the sounds of it, right, potentially what you're referring is a Citrix-based solution, which is probably doing app streaming as well as desktop delivery. In that kind of scenario, right, it turns out that Windows 365, which can only do persistent desktops, right, as we've discussed, It cannot do app streaming and non-persistent desktops. From the sounds of it, the provisioning part of spinning up and down as many desktops as you like is pretty much easy and straightforward in all the solutions. However, you will not be able to do things of non-persistent and remote apps with Windows 365. So from the sounds of it, without even getting into the details of what you're trying to propose to your customer, it looks like you might have to go down the path of a mixed hybrid of Windows 365 doing persistent and Azure Virtual Desktop doing the rest, and leveraging Intune to doing the endpoint management for all the fleet, including AVD and Win 365. And provisioning and all is easy. Like, if there is more interest at a future day, we can even touch Azure Virtual Desktop. I have a complete environment and a lot of details around that as well. So we can touch on that at a future day and how it can be managed through Intune.
So I'm going to add in a little bit here. From a provisioning point of view, you're sitting there and saying you're putting all of your apps on your base image and everything associated. What I would challenge is, if you're managing your devices with Intune today and all of your apps and packages are being deployed via Intune, then it's easier to just say, well, I'm just going to manage all of my VDI the same as I manage my workstations and use that Windows 365 scenario. Because then you do literally update the application once and it goes across your whole estate. If you're needing to do multi-session, yeah, that's where it gets a little bit more hinky. But it comes down to challenging the preconceived conceptions of the fact that I need to have a gold master image for my VDI. You don't need it. You can just go off and grab the off-the-shelf image, deploy all your policies and applications for W365 the same as you would a workstation, and your users are going to have a great experience. We use it across multiple customers today with that great experience. What it means is, from an admin overhead, it's the same process as doing it for your workstations or your laptop. So it ends up being treated the same as pretty much a VM or a workstation sitting in your environment.
Okay, yep, I understand. And then use Intune to do all the monthly SOE application updates.
Yep, definitely.
Right. Okay.
And that's it. So then what you're doing is you're removing the requirement to have a dedicated, experienced admin maintaining that base image. And you're saying, I'm going to spend more time listening to my staff to go, all right, well, you're having a performance issue. Maybe I'll just increase the SKU of your device, rather than not having the time to do that, because you're spending all the time repackaging everything, doing everything on that base image, and then having to schedule downtimes and associated. Where if you can do it as just an app replace, using that Intune model of just is new app, new version, whatever, deploy it, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And from a total cost of ownership, it's probably actually going to reduce your total cost of ownership going down that route, because you don't need somebody specialized doing cloud management. You can use the same packages that you're using for applications deployment in your workstation organization. If you're using a third-party patching solution, you can then literally use the same applications, and it becomes even lower total cost of ownership.
Yep, I think it's a fair, and Farhad, if your question is even more elaborative, what about non-persistent? Because whatever Steve is saying is 100% applicable on persistent. However, things are very different when you're using multi-session. Then you just can't replace the app update just like that. It becomes complicated. You have to think through that whole scenario very well. So let us know if the question goes beyond just persistent, and we'd be happy to get in touch and answer that.
Yep, sure. Thank you.
But a good question, right? Any questions?
Or are you waiting for us to turn off the recording?
Yeah, okay, I'll turn off the recording in case.
Yeah.
Good to hear, Adrian, that you're happy that with the content.